Welcome, everyone, to the Runners Roundtable podcast, where I am talking to different female run coaches. And today I have Ally Pesta today. And Ally, you are a woman after my own heart because you do running and yoga. And that to me is such a I don't like to say that they complement each other because I feel like they're both very different and they do help each other. But I do like to say that they definitely have a nice relationship with one another. Both, I consider both of them movement practices now at this point. So it's like, I don't know, they work well together. Sometimes they complement each other. I find that at least in my yoga practice, sometimes it feels good. It's not really helping me in what I need as a runner sometimes. And it's similar with, like, I have my oldest daughter, she does dance classes and she learned how to do splits on both sides. And every day after her dance classes, like when she first started, she would come home and she'd be like, "Mommy, you don't know how to do splits? Why can't you do splits? But like, you do yoga, why can't you do it?" And I would have to tell her, I can't do them because my hamstrings, my quads, those muscles that you need to do splits are working very differently when I run. And it would take a lot of stretching, a lot of intentionality in my movement in order to get there.
Totally.
So I love that you have those two, because I think this is going to be a fun conversation as we explore how they intersect or maybe how they have come together for you and impact your coaching. But before we get to all of that, introduce yourself and tell us your running story.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for that intro, Stephanie. I agree with you. I think it's interesting. I would get messages of like, why do you do yoga? Or like, how will yoga help my running? And it's funny. They're like, I want to be more flexible. And with running, it's really that balance. You want that balance of strength and flexibility. I found that when I was doing yoga all the time with a running practice, I actually was getting like not full blown injuries, but like little niggles more rather than like having a strong yoga practice that also is more focused on the strength building of those tiny muscles versus just the lengthening. So I feel, I don't think runners are meant to do splits, but hey, if you can do a splits and you're a runner, more power to you.
Yep.
But yeah, so my name's Ally Pesta. I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, and I now reside in Colorado, where I've recently become a run coach. And so my running story, it started when I was 8 years old. So I actually started running when I was with my dad. So my dad is a giant runner. He played college football, and for him, running was always his thing. Every single day, he'd go out and do his 3-mile run. And there was this rec center that we'd always go to. And from the earliest of ages, I always remember like movement. Back then, I think really as a kid, you called it movement. Later in my years, I think it turned into exercise, but now I've really reclaimed the word movement again. But movement was always such a huge part of my life. I wanted to do every sport, from swimming to running to basketball to volleyball, anything you could think of. Like, I just love to move. They used to call me like a little monkey when I was growing up. I'd climb on everything. And so for me, I always went to the gym with my dad. And they had a little like kids workout room that I'd go to, or I'd play basketball. And my dad would go, especially in the wintertime, and run his laps up on the track. And one day I was like, I don't want to play basketball. Like, I want to go run with my dad. I don't know why. It was like that day. It was just a cold Saturday morning. And he's like, sure. He calls me buddy. He's like, sure, buddy, come run with me. He's like, what do you want to run? I was like, I want to run a mile. And he's like, you know, that's 12 laps, right? I was like, yeah, I can do it. And so I just started running, and it was this feeling of like your feet pounding the ground, your heart beating, your lungs filling. And it was just this pure exhilaration. I was always a perfectionist growing up and always wanted to be like an achiever and go and do things. And there's always a satisfaction when I was doing different things, but nothing was like running. And I think truly at 8 years old, I felt what now people know as like the runner's high. And ever since then, it was just a huge part of my life. My dad and I would run together during the winter times on the track, and then during the spring and summer around our neighborhood. And I was like, one day I'm going to be faster than you, or like one day I'm going to beat you. But for me, running was just always this way to connect with my dad. And then growing up, it was just a place for me to have kind of a release of my mind. I've always been like an anxious kid, and my mind was always running and literally running. And running was the one place for it to help my mind to stop running, to finally silence the noise. I found that with many other forms of movement, but especially running, there was just something about it. It was that one place that was like my safe haven. And so I never did. People were like, I got asked to be on the track team or the cross country. And I was like, no, for me, running was that one thing that was mine. In being a super, I mentioned perfectionist, also a super competitive kid, like so competitive. I didn't want running to turn into that. I was competitive in every other area of my life. And I didn't want running to become another thing where I was so focused on getting first or being the best. I just wanted running to be mine. And so running just kind of stayed with me as a form of therapy. And it turned into some other things with battling like eating disorder and exercise addiction and all of that. And having to take it back from running and then reclaim running and reclaim movement, which we can get into later. But yeah, so running for me, again, it started out as like a connection point, always was a place of therapy. And now it's really still that in my life.
I love all of that because it's such a different experience from my own where like I as a child I did not like to run. And in general just like did not like to do any kind of movement that I was told I had to do.
Yep.
And it's funny because I see it now on the other end as being a parent. I have those moments where I wish my kids wanted to run with me, like where they wanted to do that thing. But, you know, I think part of it is living in Miami, Florida, and it's really hot, and
Yeah.
my kids don't want to be hot. Like it takes a
Yep.
special person to in Miami to choose to go outside in the heat and in the humidity. So I love that there was that connection to your dad, or even just that curiosity within yourself and how you truly did take a stand for yourself. Because
Yeah.
a lot of people would think that the natural progression would be, oh, she likes to run, yes, let's do track, let's do cross country. So, you know, like kudos to your younger self for drawing that boundary and saying, no, this is going to be for me. And I don't want to be competitive with it, or I don't want, because I think sometimes you can take the joy out of what you're doing it once it becomes really structured, or once it becomes something that's more than about you, right? If you're on a cross country team and it's a team effort that you're doing, then all of a sudden there might be, not all of a sudden, but just there might be a disconnect between why you're doing it and who you're doing it for. So it's amazing that you even saw that for yourself growing up. Yep. How did you come to run coaching?
Yeah. I want to comment on the, you know, it being structured. And actually, I actually found that in my last season of being with a run coach. It was the first time I've ever had a run coach. I didn't even really know that there was a such thing as run coaches. And it wasn't for say the run coach herself. It was more so just putting structure to running, started to create this kind of thing in my mind of like, whoa, this is turning into competitive. This is turning into obsession again. And I actually had to take a step back. There was other reasons with some prolonged injuries that forced me to take a step back, but like, which goes into kind of my running philosophy, which we'll get into. Like it just created this sense of you have to do it, not I want to do it. It wasn't therapy. It was looking at my watch, checking my splits, conscious of my running form. Like my mind was more anxious after a run than clear, to the point where I started just sobbing. And I called my coach. I was like, I can't do this. And she was awesome and was like, Ally, I get it. It's okay. You can step away. And it was really just that reclaiming, like, I don't want running to be not joyful. And so how I kind of got into run coaching, which is similar to, not similar, but I'd say it has common threads of kind of how I became a yoga teacher. For me, I believe everyone's a runner. I believe everyone can be a runner. And I also believe that you should move your body in the way that feels good to you. If you despise running with every single ounce of your being, maybe you're running too fast, or you also might hate running, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Not everyone has to love running. I think movement has turned into this place of like, you move to change your body or move to like fit X mold. And I have spent years and years unraveling that belief. And that is something that I hold so dear to me in the way that I coach. So I came to run coaching. So fast forward 17, again, super obsessed with exercise, love to move my body to the point where I almost went to the Naval Academy. I wanted to go to the Naval Academy in the sense of just, there was like this sense of like prestige and selflessness. And I just loved that structure and just saw this dream. So I started training for the Naval Academy. I was working with a trainer at the time. And so I was doing like this diet with my mom and whatnot, and it ended up leading to a full-blown on pretty severe eating disorder. So I had a combination of anorexia, orthorexia, and exercise addiction, which led me to 2 different hospital stays, as well as treatment, taking a full semester off of college. And so that is what led me to yoga teaching, because when I got out of the hospital for the first time, my heart rate got down to 26. And so getting out of the hospital, I wasn't allowed to do like any movement for a while. The only movement I was allowed was yoga, which I despised when I started. I was like, this is dumb. I'm not sweating. This is too easy. What is this? Like, they're telling me to breathe. I know how to breathe.
Yeah.
But there was something about like, they like words in yoga that I never heard before. It was putting loving hands on your belly. It was speaking kindly to your body. It was things that for the past 2 years, I had demonized my body. I had demonized myself. And it was for the first time, like, whoa, I can speak lovingly to my body. Like, this feels foreign. But essentially yoga kind of became that movement therapy for me for a while when running could not, which led me to want to be a yoga teacher because yoga became so healing for me. And then similarly, fast forward, lots of life happened in there, but why I became a run coach was really because I truly believe in the power of movement as a healing power. I believe that movement can and should be used to show us what we are capable of and all the incredible things that we can do. And I think there's so much out there that is preaching the opposite. It's move to look this way, move to change your body. I see it so much too. Well, yes, I also think it affects men as well, but I really see it, especially in those young females. And so I became a run coach really with wanting to be a voice in the space of, hey, if you ask me, I want to take that rest day, cool, go take the rest day. I don't care. You're listening to your body. I'm actually going to applaud you for taking that rest day. And when one of the athletes I coached also had a history of eating disorder. And for us, it was such a cool dynamic. I coached her to run her first full marathon. And every week we would journal. Like, I would give her journal prompts of like, why are we moving today? Before you move, ask yourself why. And if it's because you just went on the scale or you just checked to see how many calories you burned, skip that run today and message me instead. And so I want to be a change in this space. I want to be a light in this space. And I want to show that we can run because we love our bodies and because we can show what we're capable of, and we can challenge our minds, not because we need to go be X thin or we need to look a certain way or obsessed. We have to get these miles in. I really just want to be a voice of change in the running space because I think it's really needed.
Yeah. And it's such an interesting thing to think about, right? Or because it's bigger than running, right? And you said it
Yes.
that it has to do with movement. This is bigger than running. And it's a lot of people start running or they start going to yoga classes for those, I want to lose weight. I want to look a
Yep.
certain way. I um even for myself, like I think of my particular story with running where again I didn't like PE. I wasn't, not to say that I was not active, but I definitely did not push myself to sweat if I didn't have to,
Yep.
right? Like it was one of those things where I would work out and I would try to build the habit for it, but I was just never like, it just did nothing for me. And it wasn't until I became a mother and I have two daughters that I realized, oh, there's a lot of messaging that
Mm,
I've gotten. And I don't want my daughters to get that messaging.
yes.
Obviously, I can't control it. They're going to receive the messaging regardless. But if their first exposure to womanhood is me, then what can I do to start
Mm,
to change that narrative? So I very much so started running, and I've shared this before too, where it's like because it was the easiest thing I could do with them. I was a stay-at-home mom with them, and I had a double jogging stroller. It was real
yep.
easy to pop them in there at all times of the day, go out for runs with them. Or, there were periods of time where my oldest would wake up early, but the little one would still be asleep. So then the oldest would go in the stroller and she would be on one side, and then her stuffed animals would be on the second side, and
Mm-hmm.
we would go out because I really wanted them to grow up seeing movement
Mm,
as just something that we did, active lifestyle. It's what we do. And even now for myself, I don't push my daughters to do anything. I've got it's so funny because people are always like, you have to put them in sports or you have to do something or you have to do that. And I'm like, no, like they'll come to it. Like for me, it
yes.
was more like I came to running when I was 27 years old. And then I fell in love with it when all the movement before just never, like, I would try to run, I would try to do things, it never stuck. So
Yep.
with my daughters, it is very much that I mean, now the oldest, she does dance at school and she loves it. My youngest likes volleyball, so that's what she does. But it was very much, okay, you girls want to do that? Let's give it a try. Let's at least try it for a month. Let's give it a
Yep.
try for a month. And if after that month you don't like it, cool, we're going to do something else. And even with something like that, I feel like I'm going against the norm because
Mm,
people are always like, you have to put them in sports. They're going to learn discipline. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. And it's like, okay, but I don't want them to create. And I know this isn't everybody, but it's like, I don't want them to have a negative relationship
yep.
with moving their bodies. I want them to have fun with it, as much
Yes.
fun as they can. And so I love everything that you're saying because talk about having to deprogram
Oh yeah.
our approach to movement. So I guess the question I have is more of like a curiosity of when you get these athletes that do come to you and they say, oh, I want to start running and I want to do this race because I want to lose X amount of weight. Like, what does that discussion look like for you?
Yeah.
Because again, a lot of people get into different movement practices because they want to lose weight, or even something like in yoga where it's like you want to get more flexible, and it's like, okay, that's great. And I try to tell people, like I'll have people, and I'm sure you've had people too say the same thing where it's like, oh, I can't go to yoga because I'm not flexible, or I can't go to yoga because I can't touch
Mm-hmm.
my toes. And it's like, let's like stop thinking that those are the things you need to do in order to do it, and
Yes.
just show up, because what you really
Yes.
get is just showing up. So particularly when it comes to runners, how do you have that discussion with people? Or even just if you have an athlete, and these have been my favorite questions to ask, like if you have an athlete that you notice is just obsessing over the numbers and the metrics, and
Yep.
if your goal as a coach is to help them connect to the joy of movement, what
Yep.
is that discussion like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't think it's a one size fits all answer. I think that is to some degree my answer is that like coaching should be treated as an individual basis. It is a one-on-one, no body is the same. and nobody is the same, right? So like each person is unique in their own and all has different needs, as well as each body has different needs. Each mind has different needs. And so I think your point of like, just show up, that's huge. That's the first step of just show up and take one step, start small. I think with that connection to weight loss and so focused on the numbers and so focused on X, like for me, I have pretty honest conversations with my athletes, and it all goes back down to your why. And I love to just peel back the layers. So it's if it's, hey, I want to lose weight, why? And if it's the answer is, oh, because I actually had this conversation with someone and they're like, well, because then it'll show me that I can do something that I set my mind to. And I'm like, okay, why is that important to you? And it's like, because I start goals and I don't finish that. So we get back to that root cause, and underlying on the surface level, it's, I want to lose weight. Similarly to on the surface level as a society, we see weight loss as that tip of the iceberg. But under all of that, what it really comes down to a lot of the times is my worth is structured in how I look. My why is structured in being able to set my goals and to show that I have determination and drive. And so I think it's just, honestly, it's a slow process. It's not an overnight. It's not like, okay, tomorrow you're going to wake up and be like, no, I don't want to lose weight. I'm just going to run because I love it. Like, no, that's going to happen over time. And so I think really peeling back those layers, getting curious with themselves, and not doing a ton all at once. Not just like, okay, I'm not their therapist, right? Like yes, running and mindset and therapy, I think, is all in it. It's all wrapped in. Life discussions happen all the time. And it's not just dumping everything at once and being like, well, you shouldn't want to do it because you lose weight. It's like removing that judgment. And then also, I think for me personally, is something I really had to learn and step back as a coach, is not trying to insert my own experience into when I coach. I have a very, very unique experience, and get sometimes like nervous when I see people move too much. I'm like, oh no, you're going to get an eating disorder. And it's like, no, they might not. That's actually probably not the case. They also might. So like, know those signals, and then again, come back to their why of like, hey, why are we doing this? And if your goal is to, be determined and have drive, awesome. Then we're going to focus on that. And I think the other way of not only just having those honest conversations, but how I respond. So we use an app called Final Surge, and that's where they do their workouts. And when I respond, if they're posting about calories, I don't even comment. I'm like, cool, out of sight, out of mind. Like, I am not going to, it's not that I'm not rewarding that behavior, but that's not behaviors that I want to praise, right? I'm like, wow. And I right away ask, how did your body feel? How does your mind feel? And so I start to ask those questions so that when they're running, they're noticing, oh, how does my body feel? How does my mind feel? What is my why? And then I'll ask, did you find joy in this run? And if the answer is no, I say, okay, cool. Tomorrow, take a rest day. And then we'll start back up. So to kind of summarize all of that, I think really getting curious with our why, understanding what is behind those layers, trying to step away from what society preaches of like thinness or XYZ look is better. And then again, reinforcing that through coaching conversations, through the comments that I make, and really just knowing that like, it's not an overnight process, and it takes a lot of time, and it's a lot of ups and downs. Running's just like life. You're going to have your low points. You're going to have your high points. And some days you're going to love your run. Other days you're going to be like, damn it, this sucked. And that's okay. Life is just the same way.
Yeah. And I think there's something I wanted to say to that. It's where, I guess, to build upon what you're asking. So if you say, when you ask your athlete, did you feel joy on that run or something along those lines? What is it that you're actually asking with that? Because I have in my mind a certain response to that, but I'm curious, when you ask your athletes that question, what is it that or how is it that they usually respond to that?
Yeah. And it's different, right? For each person. When I'm asking, like, did you feel joy? It's like, for me, it's like, did you smile at least once on the run? Did you
Okay.
feel joy in your body knowing that you're strong and capable? It probably might not have felt good. You might have felt your lungs like breathing really heavy. You might have been like, damn, I want this run to be over. And though, like, the joy is knowing I have this capable, abled body that can run, and like celebration. I think the joy is more so in that like celebration piece rather than like, oh my God, I'm on cloud nine. Like, you might not be on cloud nine after every ride, but it's really like celebrating what we're capable of. And I also am like, take a look at your surroundings, like be mindful, not thinking about the 500 other billion things that you have to do today, which you might also do on a run, but it's really coming back to that celebration, what we're able to do, how we're able to move our bodies, and hoping that you smile at least once during your run.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was. But I'm like, I want to make sure we're clear here so that if people
Yes.
listen to that, because I think about it in terms of as a, I even think of myself today. So we're having this discussion on a Monday, and Mondays are my speed workout days. So
Yep.
this morning I had a tough speed workout, and there is, there were moments where I'm like, I can keep on going. Like, I know I
Yep.
can. I mean, I was breathing hard. My heart felt like it was going to come out of my chest. And yet, when I finished, I was so proud of myself for
Yes.
having done the workout. So that's why I was like, let me just make sure that what I think you mean is what you mean,
Yep.
because I want that to be clear for people too, where I say it all the time. Running is really hard. Running is hard. What changes with running, in my opinion, it's your effort and your perceived
Yes.
effort. The physical act of running, it's hard. It's hard. It's some days you find your stride early and things feel less effortful, and some days you don't and the effort is there. So I like to tell people that, like, yes, it's hard. What changes, and when it feels easier, it's just your perception of the effort
Yes.
that it takes. So that's why I was like, let me
Totally.
just clarify this joy piece, because I it is that. It's celebrating
Yep.
what you're able to do, and it's celebrating that you showed up, you gave it
Yes.
a try, regardless of whether it's a speed workout, a regular workout, a recovery workout, whatever the case is, you still did it.
Yes.
So I
Yes, for
love
sure.
that.
Yeah, I feel like it is a little moments of pride, or like it might be different for me since I started running like so early, but every time on a run, like there's one little moment of takeaway. Like I went 1 second longer, or I backed off because I realized this effort. It doesn't have to always be, oh, I pushed harder. Yay. It's might be you usually push hard. So you listen to your body. And when your coach said easy run, you actually did an easy run. And like those are those little things of just like celebrating yourself, which I think we don't do enough of. We celebrate others all the time, but we don't celebrate ourselves. And the way we speak about others, I'm like, and I'm at fault. I often do not do that myself either, but it's like, what would you say to a friend that just crushed a workout? Or what would you say to a friend that did the opposite of what their mind told them to do and, did something else? You'd be like, that's awesome. I'm so proud of you. And so I want you ending that run saying, that's awesome. I'm so proud of myself. Right. And so that is that piece of joy and pride and satisfaction that I think running provides. And similar to like yoga teaching, when I say what you learn on the mat, I want you to take off the mat. I think there's so much with running, what you learn on a run, you can then apply off a run.
Yeah. And I know for myself, running is that place where how it connects to life off the run for me. It's this reminder that I can do hard things, and that
Yes.
with each step forward, I'm moving forward. It
Yep.
may not be the giant leap or the resolution that I want,
Yes.
but that's what running has taught me. And that's what I take outside of life. And then similarly with yoga, what yoga has taught me, in a way, it's that it's okay to be with myself and to be with myself
Mm,
where I'm at today. But similar to running, it's that I can always take another breath. That next breath is going to bring me into the next moment. Again, maybe there's no resolution, and maybe the nerves, the sadness, the whatever's still there, but there's always another breath to take. Similar with running, there's always another step to take. I want to go back and touch upon something that you said, because I think it's so important for people to know that as well. It's okay to pull back.
Yes.
Right? We hear it all the time. Go the extra mile, do the extra. And it's like, it's okay to pull back. So how do you, even with your athletes, how do you communicate with them? Like, I feel like sometimes we need permission to know that like, it's okay to pull back, because again, I feel like we live in a society that always says, do more, give more.
Yes. Yes. I'd say my least favorite quote ever is no pain, no gain. I think that is like, oh, I hate that quote. I think it is just, sure, yes, you're going to have hard moments and all of that, and you still carry through. But no pain, no gain is like saying, oh, your body's screaming, you're saying, shut up, I don't listen to you. Like, that is completely disobeying and being disloyal to your body, which then creates this dissonance between your mind and your body, which truly are one. Like, we're working together, we're on the same team. I'll give a little bit of a story of this past year and how that's really transformed and helped me in coaching, which is pretty ironic because I started coaching this year and then I didn't really run. When I say this year, I mean 2022.
Yeah.
So early in 2023. So I actually had 4 different injuries in 2022. I had a labral hip tear on my right side, went back to running. 4 weeks later, I got a labral hip tear and 2 stress fractures on my left side. So I think total of 2022, I ran about maybe 2 months, which for me, since 8 years old, that's the longest I've ever taken off. There was a lot of grief in that. There was a lot of my body's against me, a lot of blame for my younger self, what I did when I was younger, even though I didn't know any better. And I think what this year has taught me more than anything is that rest and that compassion and that grace, I give to others, but I don't give to myself. And I was forced to give it to myself. And the coach that I coach under, she's like, do you want to take off time from coaching? And at first I was like, yeah, I can't coach. If I can't run, I can't tell others to run, like all of this stuff. But instead I actually continued coaching, and it was the exact opposite. It was the lessons that I was having to learn. I also was helping to implore on some of my athletes. And when they said, hey, I'm feeling a little XYZ, it wasn't, okay, push harder. It was, okay, great. Like, let's take a rest day, or where did this happen on the run? And getting curious, kind of, did we take this day easy? Did we push a little too hard? Or maybe it's just our body saying, hey, I just need a little bit of a back off. And so I think telling them that also gave me the grace and space to continue to tell myself that. And I come back to this one athlete that really, really struggled with rest days. And I would have her call me and we talk through it, being like, hey, let's talk through why this rest day is really important. And let's talk through how this rest day is going to support you for tomorrow's run. And then it kind of goes down to unraveling like what is all wrapped up in that run. Often it's like, oh, now I can eat my carbs and go drink my beer or whatever you want to do. And it's giving yourself that permission to do that, whether you move or you don't move. It's giving yourself that space and that grace to truly listen to your body. You might be hungrier on a rest day. Cool. Awesome. Go eat the food. You might be less, like, it's all wrapped up. And so, I think I kind of went on a tangent there, but I think it's really just getting curious of like, why do you not want to take those rest days? And what is the messages you're receiving that says, I have to push, I have to go hard, I am less worthy if I don't push? And then how do we stop? We pause, we ask, why are those messages true? And then the reverse of that, why is there less worth in that? And again, it's the same thing as I talked about earlier. It's not an overnight process. The first few rest days are going to be hard. The first 3-4 weeks where I wasn't allowed to do any type of movement were so damn hard. And, you know, it makes, now that I can run again, like I am so grateful for that. And I think a rest day teaches you that too, of like, okay, I'm going to rest my body and I'm going to look forward, because the thing is, if we don't do that, it's going to lead to burnout, no matter who you are. Like, it's going to lead to burnout. It's going to lead to not looking forward to runs. It's going to lead to feeling like we have to, not that we want to.
Yeah. And I think we, as runners, we definitely walk a fine line all the time. Like, I feel like all the time, I feel like and this is just me personally, where I feel like I'm always just one really tough run away from being burnt out, right? Yeah. Like where it's just, and I think, and I say that simply because it's like, for me, running is an addition to life, right? Like running is something that I do because it brings me joy. Yes, I have my goals, and I'm running with a purpose right now because I'm training for a very specific race. But there is still this moment of like, if I'm not taking care of myself outside of the run, then that one run that can be really tough, emotionally draining, can really like put a damper in my plans. Like there is, and I tell people, you know, for the most part, it's like, I don't want to run. Like I wake up and I'm like, oh, I don't want to run. But you know, I'm waking up at 4:30 in the morning to get my run before my kids. And like, there's a lot. Once I step out the door and I start running, I'm like, okay, we're good. We're here. Like, yes, we love this. When I finish, I'm like, all right, that was hard, or that was easy, or whatever the case was. And that was great. But I feel like it's such a fine line, that we walk in terms of doing enough to maintain our relationship with running, to go after our goals, but then doing too much. And I say that, and I guess it's kind of connecting to what you're saying of like, usually that one run away from burnout is because I did not take the rest day that I needed, or because I did not pull back when I needed, because there's also this incredibly, like, it's such a fallacy of, if you miss one run, it's not going to ruin things for you. Like, you're going to be okay. So I like that you share all that, because it definitely puts the running into perspective. And even just that everything you're questioning gets to is understanding the why, but beyond the why, it's understanding what's the root of it. Like, where are the thoughts? What is it? Because oftentimes the reason we give for the why isn't even something that's ours. It's something that we're carrying from society or our family or whatever else, right? Like, it's not ours.
That makes me think of two really like important things. The one, when you're like, you know, don't miss one run or whatever. For some reason that came in my mind of, you know, running at the end of the day, like, don't take it, just like you don't take your life or yourself too seriously, like running, like, sure, there are those professional athletes out there, whatnot, but for the most part, majority of us like are doing it because it's adding to our life. And so when we're able to just have that sense of ease of like, this is fun, and not taking it too seriously, I think it is that reminder of like, yeah, if I miss one run, if I miss two runs, if I miss a few, that's okay. Obviously there's a point where we get off track. If we are pursuing X race or X goal, then we need to come back to, but there's a balance. But in regards to the why, so one of my friends, we had this really, really, really cool conversation on one of our hikes one day about this idea of who put that there. And so we were talking about goals, or we were talking about beliefs. And she said that every time, she used to do this in college, she put a sticky note of like goals, as if you're putting a sticky note on a table, and then said, who put that there? And if you put that there, awesome, keep chasing that. likely most of the time, someone else probably put that there. Maybe it's from a parent, maybe it's from a teacher, a mentor, maybe society, but really getting so curious. And my words I do words for each birth year. So my words for 27 are intentionality and integral. So being super intentional and then being integral, like about what is my why? And is this integral to who I am becoming and who I want to be? And if so, how can I be intentional about getting there? And I think that's why I keep just getting so curious about, all these different beliefs that we have. And it takes a lot of effort to keep unpacking that stuff. But then I think that's where the not taking it too seriously too comes into play.
Yeah. And even to say that, I think of professional athletes, like, hey, let's remember that that's all they're doing. Like,
Yes.
that's all they're doing. They're
Yes.
not like the majority of us that, we run when we can, whether it's before work, on our lunch break, after work. It's run in between parenthood duties, pet duties. Like, no, like professional athletes. And it's not to say that there aren't professional athletes that have families and have all that stuff, but they're running, recovering, running, whereas most of us are running and then we have to do everything that's life, or we do everything that's life and then we run. So I like to point that out, because whether we are aware of it or not, we go into our runs with other stressors, right? Like I think of even again my run this morning, where it's like, oh yeah, I ran first thing in the morning, but while I'm running, I had to make sure I started at a decent time so that I could come home, shower, have breakfast, get a little stretching in before I had to take my kids to school. It's not like I ran and then I could come home and just hang out. No, like that was something that I was very aware of. So I think even that is really important to remember for anyone who's listening to this, that for a lot of us, we are adding running to our life, hopefully because it brings us joy, it makes us happy, it feels good. But because we're adding it to our life, it's just another thing that we do on top of everything.
Totally. And I think that's some of my athletes, they'll be like, oh, this run didn't feel good, or like I'm not recovering. And we get curious about okay, what else is going on in life? Because often there's so much other stress. Like, are we sleeping enough? Do we have a really, really stressful work week? It was really cool. I had one of my athletes actually message me a few weeks ago and was like, hey, she had just finished an awesome race, one of her first halves. And she was like, we had kind of just starting to do some base building post half. She messaged me, she was like, I am sorry, but I'm so burnt out and I don't want to train right now. And it was so cool for her to be like, listen to her body. And she felt so apologetic. I was like, no, this is awesome. Like, I'm so proud of you. And we took a few weeks off, and I put in just optional move for joy, random days, and said, do whatever, literally. And if you don't do anything, that's also totally okay. She's now getting back into it. And she's like, I'm so glad I took that break. And I think a lot of times, especially, I think this is pretty synonymous in the running world, is that black and white thinking of if we take time off, we can never get back. And if we're not running all the time, then we can never step back, or we have to be running all the time. And then once we don't, and it's just this teeter-totter. And so my belief, I think, as a run coach and just in life, and something that's helped me so much that I've had to learn through recovery is finding that gray space and living in that gray. And I used to hate the gray. I was like, I need black and white. That's all I live in. I either go 0 or 100, which I still do. My friends all make fun of me. They're like, you either are not in and you're all in. And though there's just beauty in finding that gray of knowing if you take a few weeks off, great, we'll jump back in. It might be a bit hard to jump back in, but we'll jump back in. And similarly, in all of life, you can find that middle ground. I struggle. I think balance is a good word, but I for some reason, gray space feels better, because balance, I think, is really unique to each person, how they see it. So for me, it's feel like you can have a little bit of everything.
Yeah. And I think it's also a reminder what you're talking about. And I try to tell people this all the time, where it's hey, being a runner is more than just running.
Yes.
Being a runner is taking the time to recover. Being a runner means you're intentional about your sleep. Being a runner means you're doing the strength work, the mobility work, the stretching, all that other stuff. And I like to think about it in terms of sometimes having to get really concrete with people in terms of, hey, if you don't stop now, you're actually going to have to take a longer break later. Whereas if you stop now, you take a little break, but then we're back in it for a longer stretch of time. So sometimes it's also pointing that out to people that like, hey, a runner means you do more than run. Like it's again, when we're talking about this is something we're adding to our lives. To me, it's like it has to make sense. Like, and I agree with you because that's one of the things I always do with anyone that I work with one-on-one. We always begin with the why. Like, why do you want to do this? So when we're exploring your goals, like why? Like if you meet the goal, what's going to happen? If you don't meet the goal, what's going to happen? At what point are we good? Are we not good? But again, it's that like it's the being a runner is more than that. And I also love this idea of gray space. I would always tell my husband's very black and white. And like I would tell him, I'm like, you're black and white. And I like to swim in the gray because I'm always like, let's get curious. Like, what else is there? What other question can I ask? And there was this saying, or I read it somewhere a few months ago where it's like, life isn't about finding the answers. It's about learning how to ask better questions. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's me. That's me. I'm always like, what's the other question that I can ask? Like, how can we explore ourselves? Because I think we're also talking about being human beings and people that are constantly changing. And I feel like the benefit of having a coach, from what I'm hearing you say, and I just want to really highlight this for people, is that one, your coach is there to support you as you push on, pull back, whatever the case is. The coach is there to help you safely get back into running or back into movement if you do take an extended period of time. And also, based on your example, your coach is someone who's like a confidant in movement, right? Like here's this person that felt comfortable enough because honestly, that takes a lot of courage to tell your run coach, hey, I can't right now. Like I'm done, right? Because for as much as a run coach is an accountability person, and I say this for myself too, where it's like, oh, there oftentimes I'll get certain runs done or I'll go out and I'll try just because I know my coach, either she has the belief in me and that's why she gave me a specific workout, but also because she gave me that workout and I know she's going to see whether I did it or not. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go. So I think there's such a dance here that you do with your coach. And it really does, again, like props to that person who told you, hey, like, no, I need to pull back. And again, that pulling back is what's going to help you continue to move forward once you're ready to do so.
For sure. Yeah. It makes you think of like, progress is not linear. My next tattoo I want to get is like a line that's a squiggly that underneath says keep going. Because at the end of the day, we got to pull back, we got to push forward, and we got to let ourselves evolve. Like life is meant to evolve. I think similarly to our running journey, our yoga practice, our bodies, I think that is the one thing that we're like, I'm going to stick in this body forever. It's like, wait a second, we let life evolve. Why don't we give ourselves the grace to also let our bodies evolve and let our running practice evolve? Like life is meant to evolve. How boring would it be if we lived a Groundhog Day, the same day over and over and over again, the same body over and over and over again, right? There's just so much beauty in the evolution. And there's a lot of like push and pull of getting okay with that space of evolution.
Yeah. Listen, that's why I tell people, I don't even know where I heard it, but I just love it. It's like, we're human beings. We're not human done, right? Like we're continuing to evolve. All right. This is going to be a tricky question, but I think you're going to be up for the task. If you had to describe your coaching philosophy in one sentence, what would it be?
So good.
I'm like putting you on the spot.
I know. I would say empowering you or empowering all you're capable of to dispel your limiting beliefs.
Oh, I love that. That is really good. Congrats. Congrats for putting that out right on the spot. I have an idea for what your coaching style is based on what we've talked about, but how would you describe your coaching style?
Yeah. I'd say I love coaching all athletes, but my favorite is beginners, or like people that are newer to, maybe it's their first half. Maybe they've run, but they've never like run a race. And I think it comes back to like my one belief of like empowering you to push past those limiting beliefs. I think often when we're starting out, it's a lot of that mindset. And for me, because running is such a mindset and a therapy thing for me, I love that. By all means, I'm here to also coach the people that want to Boston qualify and push past, because there's a lot of limiting beliefs there too. But there's something so cool about seeing that person who literally, I had an athlete was like, I'll never run more than 6 miles. I can't. And she ended up running her first half and crushed it. And it was so cool. So my coaching style, I think it's fun. It's uplifting. I'm going to make you laugh. I'm going to make you smile. I'm going to support you and be there for you every single step of the way. And I think really at the root of it is just like empowerment and curiosity. We're going to get curious together, curious about why we're doing what we're doing, curious about how it feels in our body, curious about how it feels in our mind, and then empower you when you go out for that run and you're like, I can't do this today. I'm going to probably give you some tough love and be like, I know you can. And if you're, I can't do this today because my foot hurts. Okay, great. We're not running today. But if it's like, I don't believe in myself, I'm going to believe in you until the point where you start to believe in yourself. So really that curiosity and that empowerment, I think, are the core drivers of everything that I do.
Yeah. Listen, those are, again, curiosity is one of my big values. Like it is up there. It's up
Oh
there.
yeah.
So if someone is interested in working with you, what is that process like? How do they reach out to you? Do you do a consultation? And then my favorite question is, how do you determine whether that person is a good fit for you and whether you are a good fit for them?
Yeah, great question. So currently I'm coaching under a team called Elevate Your Running. They're a Colorado-based team, but we coach people from all over. So I would say reach out to me. I think it'll be in the notes, my email or through Instagram. And yeah, I love to set up that consultation. I'll send you a Google form where you'll fill out some questions. And then we'll kind of talk through that. We'll just have a one-on-one conversation. I'll get to know you better. You'll get to know me better. And we'll see if it's a good fit. And if it's not, totally fine. And if it is, awesome. Let's get started whenever you want to get started. To know if it's a good fit, I think for me, I truly believe everyone is a runner. So if you're like, but I don't run, or I've only run a half mile in my life, like, awesome. I want to work with you. Like, let's get it. Let's chase your goals. If that is your goal, if running's not your goal, cool. That's fine. But if you're listening to this podcast, have a little bit of an inkling that you like to run. And so I think for me, it's just, do we have the same energy, or is what you're looking for something I can provide? And I think one thing, I'm open to taking pretty much all athletes. But one of my other biggest beliefs is like staying in your lane. So if there's, something when it comes to like physical therapy or nutrition, like I can give guidance, but I'm a big believer of, if you're looking for someone to be your nutritionist, your physical therapist, and your run coach, I don't have the credentials to do that, nor do most run coaches. So knowing what you're asking for is in alignment as well. And then I'm going to be very honest of like, hey, if you have this thing, here's some awesome people to go connect with. But I'm also going to stay in my lane because they're the experts. I'll be the expert when it comes to running and building an awesome plan and supporting you and empowering you. So that's kind of how I do the process. So an intake, reach out to me. We'll do an intake call. And then we'll go from there.
Yeah. And I appreciate what you said there, because I think it takes a lot to own who you are and to know that, like, hey, this is my lane. That's not my lane. Because I feel like there are some coaches that would take on that client that wants all of that and that would maybe like try to give advice with that stuff. So how did you get to that point where you feel comfortable in saying like, no, this is my lane. Like if you want someone like that, then here are some recommendations. And like the undercurrent to that question, I guess, for lack of a better word, is that like abundance mindset. I come back to like that abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset of like, you're like, yeah, I'm not the one for you. It's okay. Keep on going versus, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get another client. I really need this client or blah, 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 blah. Like, yes, I'm going to take you, even though I can't really help you, but let me
Yes.
take you because I need you type of thing. Because I find that
Yes.
that's also part of it where it's like, there's enough coaches and there's enough runners and running is getting more and more popular. And
Yes.
more people are buying into the idea of getting run coaches. So how did you get to that point for yourself where you feel confident in saying, this is my lane. We can have that conversation. I want to support you, but this is my lane.
Yep. Yeah, I'd say there's a few things. I think one, when it comes to like staying in your own lane, I think from my own experience, I've had some different coaches or people growing up that didn't stay in their own lane. And I saw the negative repercussions of that. And I never want to be that person. The credentials that you have to become a registered dietitian or a doctor in physical therapy is wild. And those people should be doing their roles. I don't have those credentials. And so I'm not going to be, that's like someone who is a business major being like, I'm going to go code this data, and they've never taken a coding class in their life. You wouldn't trust them to go code the back end of your app and launch it. So why would you trust someone that, is not a registered dietitian to give you, here's this full nutrition advice, right? So I think that's, for me, is like, I never want to be the person that maybe a person in my past was for me. And I think when it comes to that abundance and scarcity mindset, it makes me think of the way I kind of approach therapy. And I started therapy when I was 17, but you're never going to always click with the same therapist, right? Like there's abundance of therapists out there, and that's awesome, but everyone has a different approach. I think growing up as a people pleaser, I definitely had like, I want everyone to like me. And then you just realize like over time that just causes a lot of stress. And you don't have to be for everyone, and that is okay. While yes, I want to spread kindness and joy and love in this world, that doesn't mean that I'm going to be for everyone, and that's fine. And then similarly, taking that and applying it to run coaching. Like you said, there's a variety of run coaches out there. I'm a pretty high energy, wild type of person. That's not your vibe. That's totally fine. There's gonna be a run coach out there that's gonna fit your needs. And so I think it's a two-way street. Not every job is fit for you. Not every run coach will be fit for you. And that's a part of life. And so that's kind of where I've come to, like, just recognizing I'm not for everyone and vice versa. And then knowing that, really trusting your credentials. And I want to speak that to other run coaches too. Like, everyone can do their own thing. But please just like, don't give nutrition advice if you're not a registered dietitian. There's guidance, but like everybody is different, and there's more harm than good that usually comes to that.
Yeah. And I think when we're also thinking about keeping people in the sport or inviting people into the sport, it's how do we create those nurturing relationships where people are actually going to get what they need from it and get the correct information, especially now. And everyone's going to be like, oh my God, here she goes talking about social media and all that stuff. I love social media. It's wonderful, but it's like, you get a lot of information there from people who are not experts or, and my big thing is always wishing people would just say, hey, this is what works for me, not guaranteed to work for anybody else. Like, this is what works for me. So I like that. I like and just appreciate your openness to that and to understanding that. And even like in your own way, very much so advocating for the sport and advocating for this, like, do no harm in the sport.
Yep. Yeah. I think it makes you think too of like getting so comfortable with the word no. Like, I used to be such a yes person to the point where I realized saying yes actually detracts from like getting you on the right path. Like, saying no is getting more clear in where you want to go and what you want to do. So as a run coach, if it's not a right fit and I say no, that doesn't mean that like there's anything against you. There just probably is a better yes out there, and vice versa. If you say no to me, that's totally fine. There's probably a better yes out there. So I'm a big believer of like, you have to say no for those right yeses.
Yeah. So everyone who's listening, just remember that the no leads to the yes that you actually want, right?
Yes.
Like, and it's also just that no brings clarity.
Totally.
I was curious if you can just tell us a little bit as to what the word reclamation means for you.
Ooh, that is a good question. Oh, I think for me, it's just like a continuing coming back. Like truly, I think for me in my own journey, it's an everyday process. It's waking up every day and reclaiming my yes to life, reclaiming my yes to my body, reclaiming my yes to my why. And it's hard. It's really hard. And similarly, like it's like something that's been with me recently is like, if I can't reclaim or say yes or love myself, like who's going to? And so I think that reclamation of reclaiming, whether that's reclaiming your running practice, your relationship to yourself, relationship to your body, whatever that looks like, doing that on an everyday basis, is how we move forward.
Yeah. I mean, it is because I feel there was a point, I think last year, where I was very big on the word reclamation as well, because it was like, how do I continue to come back to myself?
Yes.
And in order for me to come back to myself and feel at home within myself, it was that reclaiming the space that I take up, reclaiming how comfortable I feel in different spaces, reclaiming that who I am today is enough, or who I am right now is enough. And that is definitely a hard practice. And even within running, for me, it's reclaiming my relationship to running, because I think that's something that people just think they run. And I'm like, no, you're actually in a relationship with running as well, right? Like for me, it went from when I started running, it was more, I just wanted to see what I could do. And then the more I learned, it was like, oh, PRs, and let me run fast, and let me do this. And it's been, I would say over the past few years, it's trying to reclaim that initial awe of what can I do, and letting go of the numbers and the metrics and all of that stuff. Because when I was so focused on the numbers, running, and it's not to say running has never really stopped being fun for me, but running became more of a chore and felt more like a job when I was hyper focused on numbers. Whereas when I started to approach running as a how do I want to feel, then again, it was like very much so like I felt like I was reclaiming this practice. Because again, I do think running is a practice, it's a movement practice, very similar to yoga, very similar to anything else that you do with any kind of frequency. So it is that coming back to yourself. But I also, like, I asked that because reclamation seems to be such a big part of your story. And
Totally.
even when you're coaching your athletes, it is that reclaiming their why and reclaiming their awareness of that why.
Yes. Oh, all that gave me goosebumps, especially when you said reclaiming taking up space. I think for me, the past going on 10 years, this year will be my 10-year like recovery anniversary. And that has been like the biggest thing. I think growing up, I was this just like loud, vivacious. I took up space every time I walked into a room, and a variety of different messages over time was like, you're too much, you're too loud, you're too this. And so I shrunk myself to the point of a week left to live. Right. And so I think, especially this year, in the spirit of being injured, which I'll go on a little side tangent real quick. But one thing that like on rest days, if people are struggling, I'm like, well, what can you do with that rest day? Can you go call that friend? Can you go do some hobby that you've been wanting to do? For me, that long period of rest, I've always dreamed of writing a book. And so I actually finished my memoir, which hopefully will be published soon, working on that. But in regards to that, it's like that whole year, I think writing those words on paper was just like a reclamation of my story, and a reclamation of who I am, and knowing that story is going to continue to evolve and to change. But I think this past year, I've been so fortunate to have just such an incredible group of people around me in Colorado, and found kind of like reclaimed a new friend group that just saw me for me and wasn't like, you're too loud, Ally, we can hear you 10 miles away, volume 4. It was like, Ally, we can hear you 10 miles away, scream from the rooftops. And that is like the energy I need. And so I think taking up space goes beyond just the physical space. It's like the energy, and being someone, not everyone lives like being someone that just naturally is born to I just take up a lot of space. And I think as a woman, you're often told like quieter, smaller, shrink. A lot of this year has been reclaiming that taking up space piece.
I love that. Final question, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this based on what we just shared with one another, is how can we make running more accessible and inclusive?
Ooh, this is so good. On part of my day job, I work for Zillow, and we have a lot of what we call like affinity networks or employee resource groups. And for a few years, I was president of our ADAPT network, which stands for Able and Differing Abilities Partnering Together. I joined it for my own experience with like mental health, but I've learned so much about the disability space. And I think accessibility and inclusivity goes beyond just disabilities, right? It's you see people that look like you when it comes to race, gender, body type, everything. And I think the first piece is just creating spaces that people feel comfortable enough to show up. I'm currently talking with someone, her name's Iman. She started this group called The Rundown, which is amazing. And she started in the sense that she wanted to also create spaces and communities where people felt that they could show up. And so I think it's being conscious of what you're putting out into the world, and that messages that you're sending, and really making sure that the messages that you are sending are like, hey, we all are going to look different, whatever, and we're all accepted here. So I think connecting with other people that don't look like you, have different backgrounds than you, inviting them, learning, listening is so big. I think often we're quick to just insert our own opinion, but having those conversations and listening and recognizing I don't have that same experience as you, so I'm just here to listen, to understand, not to respond, I think is huge. So yeah, I'd say create spaces that people can show up. I think empowering people, that might feel they don't belong, to show them that they do belong. And I think as we can add to this in our own part, but I think just as a bigger running community, like, yes, social media is bad, and it can also be good, like posting different people that don't fit your typical runner's body or runner's look. Continuing to just expand, I think clothing brands, like really just pushing on them to like make sure we have sizes that are inclusive, what models that they use. So it's cool to see that. I think it's trending that way. But I think we still have a lot of work to do, and just knowing that like what you put out there, be a voice of inclusivity, not a voice of pushing people out.
I agree, because I honestly think that a lot of the people who are in the running community, we are the best ambassadors for the sport.
Yes.
So it is truly, there are systemic issues, there are financial barriers, there are community barriers to it, right? Like there's all these other barriers that I don't want to minimize, but I also want to highlight that those of us who are currently runners, we have the power within us
Yes.
to make the space for people. And I'd say over the last few weeks, I've had this realization of like, oh, vulnerability leads to depth. And obviously, like, that's something we all know. And yet we're like, ugh. But it's very much this like, oh, the vulnerability of opening up to people and of talking to people makes you realize that you're not alone. So even on both ends, right? Of like, hey, I'm the runner, but then reaching out to a person and saying, hey, I'm going to go run in this area. Do you want to join me? And
Yep.
the same thing of the person who wants to get into running or who wants to go for walks or who wants to move, also opening up and being like, hey, I really want to do this. Will you join me with it?
Yep.
And so, yeah, so there's so much. And that's a question I always end on because I think it's important for us to continually have that conversation and then to ask always, how can we do better? How can we
Yep.
be better? And how can we make the sport better?
For sure. 100%. Everything you
Yeah.
said.
Okay, final question is just tell us where we can connect with you. How can we learn more about you? And do you have anything fun, exciting, or interesting coming up that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, you can connect with me. So I have two Instagram accounts. I'm trying to build up my movement one. So follow me on Ally Ray Moves, ALLYRAE Moves. We'll be trying to post a lot more there. So you can follow me there and connect with me. I would love to connect with any and all of you. And fun coming up. I get nervous even saying it since I had to cancel 4 races last year, but I have my first race back April 30th. And I am just like so excited, so nervous about it, but I'm really, gonna listen to the advice I give others of just finding that gray space, finding that balance. So I'm super excited about that coming up, and hoping it'll be a good race back to the sport.
What distance are you racing?
It'll be a half.
A half marathon on April 30th. That's
Oh
going to be
yeah.
a lot of fun. And there's gray space, there's celebration, there's grace, there's
Oh,
reclamation in all of this. And I think truly, I really do feel that that's something that's so defining for you, where it is a constant state of reclamation. And even as
yeah.
you enter the sport, not that you ever left it, but as you enter it in a different way right now, you're entering it with all the experience of 2022 and
Yep.
all the lessons learned of 2022. So I'm excited to see what the next few months look like for you. And then how April 30th, I'm sure that's going to be a really emotional day
Oh
too.
yeah.
April 30th is going to be an emotional day for you. So I am looking forward to cheering you on and to seeing you continue to reclaim yourself, your different movement practices, and the space that you take up everywhere, on and off the mat, on and off the run, on and off the internet, like whatever it is. So thank you so much for being on the podcast and for chatting with me today. Any final words for the listeners?
I just want to thank you so much for creating this space and for having these conversations. I think they're so, so important. And I think one final thing that I end every yoga practice with that I think is just a belief that we all need to constantly remind ourselves is that we're enough no matter what.
And there you have it, y'all. We're enough no matter what. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye.